Welcome, beloved, to A Mystic in Christ. This podcast is here to help you remember yourself as one beloved of God. Each word is offered to help you feel how deeply seen, held, and chosen you truly are. Because in reality, nothing stands between you and the presence of love. Only a thin veil of forgetting. May these moments together be a bridge to remembrance, lifting the veil and carrying you home into the arms of love you never left. I'm your host, Nadia, and together we listen for what love wants to say. So let's dive into today's episode. What if the most dangerous thing a woman can be is wholly undivided? For 2000 years, women in the Western world have been handed a choice. You could either be the Madonna, archetype, pure, selfless, devotional, keeping your body holy by keeping it contained, or you could choose to be the whore, the fallen woman, shameful, in need of saving. And if you wanted to be loved and accepted and included and survive in a world that was not benign to women, you better chose the Madonna. And you kept everything else very, very quiet. But I want to ask you something today. What if that choice, that ancient, suffocating binary, was never yours to begin with? What if it was deliberately constructed to exile a certain kind of feminine power men in authority found threatening? What if the woman they called a whore was actually a priestess? Now, before I go on, I want to let the voice that is far older and wiser than my own speak. I want to share with you verses from a Gnostic text called The Sunder, Perfect Mind, found in 1945 in the desert close to Nag Hammadi in Egypt. The author of this poem is believed to be a woman, and I actually think it was a transmission from Wisdom Sophia herself, the divine feminine, the great she, God's consort. Let these words land in your heart, beloved. I am the first and the last. I am she who is honored and she who is mocked. I am the whore and the holy woman. I am the wife and the virgin. I am the mother and the daughter. I am the limbs of my mother. I am a sterile woman, and she has many children. I am both awareness and obliviousness. I am humiliation and pride. I am without shame. I am ashamed. Yes, the great she. She's everything. She does not choose. She does not exile one part of herself to make another part more palpable. She holds it all in her heart, the honored and the mocked, the holy woman and the whore, and she calls it all sacred. She calls it all herself. And this is the episode where we, as women, learn to do the same. Welcome back, beloved, to Mystic in Christ, where intimacy is a pathway to the divine. I'm Nadia, and today's episode is called Blessed Virgin or Holy Whore. We're going all the way in today into history, into the body, into the shadows, and especially into the embodied practice of bringing home those parts of the divine feminine that have been exiled in the collective for millennia. So, to understand where we are today as women collectively, we have to go back much further than Freud, further even than the cross and the church. We have to go back to the world that existed long before Christianity became the dominant religion in the Western world. You see, in ancient Mesopotamia and Canaan and Egypt, there were women who served as sacred sexual temple priestesses. In Hebrew, these priestesses were called kedeshot. That word has almost universally been translated as cult prostitute, harlot, or whore. But the root of that word is kadosh, which actually means holy, set apart, consecrated. These women were not selling themselves on the streets. They were women set apart, consecrated to the goddess, trained in the art of sacred presence, in ritual, and in the mysteries of the body as a portal to the divine. Their sexuality was not sinful, it was consecrated. It was their deepest power. Their bodies were considered sacred vessels. To be in their presence, to receive their blessing, was understood as a form of communion with something much, much larger than yourself. By the time Jesus came onto the scene, during the period of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, these women still existed in the surrounding cultures. They were still practicing the old ways of goddess worship. And Christ's beloved, Mary Magdalene, may even have been one of them. They had direct access to the divine through their own bodies, without intermediaries and without the permission of the religious authorities, which was exactly the problem for the patriarchy. The religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they just called these women harlots and whores, not because of what they were actually doing, but because any woman who accessed the divine through her own body, outside of the sanctioned structures of the temple and their male authority, was a challenge to everything that these men had ever built. She was a living refutation of their corrupted power, which is exactly what Jesus was challenging. He ate with these priestesses. He knew them as his own. And when the woman came to him, weeping, anointing his feet with spikenard and drying them with her hair, which was very intimate and even a transgressive act in that culture at the time, Yeshua did not recoil. He received her with reverence and instead scolded the disciple who questioned her act. He revered her, and he found her holy. Eventually, he was crucified for a whole lot of reasons, but I believe that part of this was exactly the kind of refusal to uphold the hierarchies that kept these womb priestesses small and holy men like the Pharisees in power. And within the story of Jesus, there are two women who carry this enormous symbolic weight. On the one hand of the spectrum we talked about, there's his mother, Mary, and then on the other, there's Mary Magdalene, his beloved. And this is where the divine architecture of this collective feminine wound becomes most visible for us today, because Mary, the mother of Jesus, is still venerated by the church as the blessed Virgin Mother, she who conceived through light, whose body was untouched by men, whose holiness was inseparable from her purity. She is exalted precisely because the erotic is absent in her image. That makes her safe and manageable. She's become the acceptable face of the feminine, radiant, selfless, pure, and contained. And then Mary Magdalene, on the other hand, who was arguably closer to Christ than anyone, I mean, she was present at the crucifixion when most of the other disciples had fled. She was the first person to witness the resurrection and also the first one to carry these news to the rest of the world. She was more and more exiled and cast into the shadows. But that came later. She was not ever described as a prostitute in the Gospels. She was only mentioned as a woman from whom 7 demons were cast out, which most contemporary scholars today understand as a description of healing from illness or suffering and not a sexual sin. There is a transmission from Yeshua on the blog where he describes exactly what those 7 scare quotes demons actually were. And I'm going to link to that in the show notes for you if you would like to read up more on that. But almost certainly Mary Magdalene was a woman of means and social standing who actually helped fund Jesus' ministry. And I dare say she was one of the most evolved disciples of all. I mean, after all, she was the one who first resurrected or awakened after Yeshua's resurrection. In the Gospel of Philip, she is described as a companion Jesus loved more than all the other disciples. In the Gospel of Mary, she receives visions and teachings that the man did not. So she was a woman of profound spiritual authority. And that authority clearly was very inconvenient for the patriarchal power structures at the time, especially Simon Peter, who was so misogynist. He even asked Jesus that she'd be sent away because she was not worthy. And that is not just something I'm making up. It's found in the Gospel of Thomas in saying 114. Simon Peter says to Jesus, "Let Mary leave us, for women are not worthy of life." And then Jesus responds by telling Peter that Christ himself will guide Mary to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit, like the male disciples, clearly making fun of all his hateful misogyny. The conflation of Mary Magdalene with the sinful woman in Luke's Gospel, who was this unnamed woman who wept at his feet before crucifixion, that was not written in scripture. It was a deliberate theological choice made to exile her, officially made by Pope Gregory I in 591 AD in his homily, where he just simply merged like 3 separate women from the Gospels into a single archetype. The penitent prostitute, the fallen woman saved by grace. And ever since then, the church had exiled Mary Magdalene. The virgin was elevated, and the woman with an actual human body and sexuality, with pure presence, relational power, and spiritual authority, she was cast aside as the whore. Augustine, a theologian who was writing before Pope Gregory, even in the 4th century AD, he poured his own very complicated interior life into the foundations of Western Christian thought, with serious consequences that are still rippling today. He famously prayed, "Lord, make me chaste, but not yet." He had a mistress for years before his conversion to Christianity, and he struggled profoundly with the body and its desires. This same man later crystallized the doctrine of original sin as something transmitted through sexual intercourse. He found that the body itself, and especially the body of woman, was the site of humanity's fall from grace. That theology calcified in the church. It became the water everyone eventually swam in. And the message it sent to women to this day is this: your body is the site of sin. Your desire is dangerous, your sexuality is a weapon, and if you want to be part of us and belong, you need to be the Madonna or be cast out as the whore. In the late 19th century, this psychological split was coined as the Madonna-Whore complex by Freud, who observed this struggle in his male patients. These men that he was treating divided women into two categories. On the one hand, there was the pure, holy woman you would respect and marry. And on the other hand, there's the sexual woman you desire, but you cannot respect. So these men struggled to feel sexual desire for the women they deeply loved, and they could not love the women they desired. Freud named this the Madonna-Whore complex, and he traced it back to the structure of the unconscious, the splitting of the mother image. But Freud was just simply observing this through the lens of his time, Victorian Vienna, but he didn't invent it. The fruit of that tree had been planted more than 2,600 years prior, at least, when the feminine face of God was wiped out of Hebrew culture. In 622 before Christ, God's wife, Asherah, was officially removed from the Jerusalem temple. Before that, Asherah was simply known as God's consort. And there were statues in the temple and people would pray to her. They had a goddess for centuries. But the purging of the goddess took place during one sweeping religious reform led by King Josiah of Judah as part of a campaign to centralize worship around the sole male god. So the Madonna-Whore split was not born in a Victorian consulting room. It was born millennia ago, in the temples, in the churches, in the courtrooms of religious law, in the mouth of Pope Gregory, in the pen of Augustine, and the scorn of every Pharisee who called a sacred womb priestess a whore. However, the Madonna-Whore complex doesn't only live in men. It lives in women too. It shows up in how we relate to our bodies, in how we shrink from our own desire, our erotic innocence, our pleasure and our power. It lives in how we exile the parts of ourselves that feel too much, want too much, take up too much space, or express themselves in a way the dominant culture has deemed unseemly. And it also lives in how we judge each other as women. This is a collective wound, and it lives in the body, which means it can only be healed through the body. So what does it actually look and feel like to be truly undivided? So rather than using a rigid system of Jungian archetypes, I want to talk about what I call feminine flavors. There are different expressions or energies or essences that live within the full spectrum of the divine feminine. These are not separate women you become, but all flavors of one great she. So let's name those flavors. And let's name all of them, not just the ones on the light spectrum that are culturally approved, but also the ones in the darker spectrum that we have unconsciously exiled. On the lighter end of the spectrum, we begin with the virgin. And I mean virgin not in the sense that a woman who's never had sex, but a woman who is whole unto herself. One who is self-contained, sovereign, who belongs to no one but herself and the divine. She's pure presence and erotic innocence. Then if you go from left to right, the next flavor on the spectrum is the mother. She is the nurturer, the sustainer, the one who creates life and tends to it with devotion. She pours herself out in self-emptying, kinetic love. She is softness, warmth, holding, and also fierce protection. And then we keep moving on to the right. There's the bimbo flavor. I'm keeping that word because she deserves to be named. She is playful and she lives in her unapologetic femininity. She's the woman who wears pink and laughs loudly and refuses to be too serious. She's not shallow. She's someone who lives in her lightness, in breeze and sparkle and delight. And then comes the sage. She is the one who knows. She's the woman with depth, with wisdom and inner authority. She has walked through fire and came out knowing. She speaks from a place that cannot be argued with, only received. And hand with her is the healer flavor. She's the one who holds sacred space. She knows herbs, prayers, and the silence that restores. Her gift is to be present in the wound, and she knows that love itself is the healer. Next to the healer, we have the queen. She's sovereign, commanding, and regal. She does not apologize for her power. She governs her domain with clarity and grace, and the kind of authority that doesn't ask for permission from anyone. And now we're moving towards the slightly more dark end of the spectrum, the flavors that have been more heavily exiled by contemporary or common culture. She who lives in the shadows, and she is the one we need to talk about. First, there's the wild woman flavor. She cannot be tamed. She runs with the wolves, barefoot. She dances in the dark and trusts her own instincts over every rule she's ever been given. She is the divine feminine in her most primal, untamed state. And she frightens people who need women to be manageable. And then there's the priestess. She holds the sacred mysteries. She is liminal, initiated into the rites of death and rebirth. She walks between worlds. She knows things that cannot be taught, only remembered. She is like a gatekeeper between this world and the unseen. And finally, on the utmost other end of the polarity spectrum, we have the sacred slut, or the holy whore. She who carries the fire of eros as a spiritual transmission. She who has made peace with her deepest desire, not to perform or commodify it, but to offer it as prayer. Because her body is an altar, her presence is a portal, and she was called a whore because those who could not hold her did not understand her. And what we cannot understand, we fear. Let's come back to our opening recitation of Thunder, Perfect Mind, where wisdom Sophia speaks and she says, I am all of this. So again, none of these flavors is higher or holier than another. The virgin is not more sacred than the slut. The mother is not more valuable than the wild woman. They are all aspects of the great she. The divine feminine who, as Sophia sings in the Thunder Perfect Mind, is everything, casts out nothing, and holds it all in perfect love. Now again, in the Gospel of Thomas, which was found in that same clay jar in Nag Hammadi as the Thunder text, Christ says, I am the one who comes from what is undivided. Undivided. What does it mean to be fully undivided? That is the true invitation. Not having to choose, but to come home to all of it. Because I believe Jesus understood and revered the divine feminine at a depth most of his contemporaries never could. So, how do you know which feminine flavors you have not integrated yet? Which part of her are still living in your secret shadow? It's simple, though not always comfortable. Just look at how you judge other women. The parts of the divine feminine you have exiled in yourself will show up as exactly the parts that you judge, cringe at, or feel triggered by in another woman. If you roll your eyes at a woman who's too innocent, too naive, too openly vulnerable, there's most likely a part of you that was shamed for exactly that innocence at some point in your life. If you feel contempt for the woman in the pink bodycon dress with the fake long lashes, you're looking at a part of yourself that you had made unwelcome. And if something tightens within you when a woman speaks openly and freely about her sexuality, her desire, and her body, it may mean that there's a part within you that has not fully come home yet. Now, remember, this is not about judging yourself for your own judgment. It's just information. And now, as the Divine Feminine is rising again on the planet, she is calling all her exiled daughters home. She is showing you which parts are still longing for love through the mirror of your sisters. So take an honest look at what bothers you in our women. It will tell you everything you need to know about where your next growth edge lies. And I'm going to help you out a little bit here. I'm going to tell you a personal story about this. Okay, here's the deal. For a long time, I used to really judge the bimbo energy. I always considered myself as a very deep and spiritual person, intellectual and drawn to the mysteries. And I prided myself on that highbrow seriousness. Whenever I would encounter a woman who was all sparkles and pink and lashes and breezy lightness, I would judge her quietly and sometimes not so quietly. I just thought, well, I'm not like that. I'm much deeper than that. Which meant, of course, that I had completely exiled my own inner bimbo. Many years ago, I went to a tantric women's retreat. And the focus of that retreat was exactly that. Exploring the different feminine flavors within us, finding our edge, and bringing home those aspects we were still judging through the practice of sacred embodiment. So in groups of around 4 or 5 women, we would sit in circles and reflect on which flavors we were still resisting. In the sacred container of that retreat, we were invited to embody the flavor we most needed to meet that day. And our sisters would feel into us too and be like, you need to embody the bimbo more, in my case. So they picked out a very girly red dress and they said, let her come out and play. Which was, of course, very uncomfortable for me, and I felt ridiculous at first, because I thought, oh, now I have to perform something hollow and feel embarrassed in front of everybody. But on the contrary, it was so much fun, and it actually really liberated me. We laughed so hard, and she laughed, the part of me that I had locked away. And she spun and twirled and was gloriously playful. It was something about the permission slip that I received that day and the complete absence of judgment from the women around me that allowed that fragrance in me to loosen up. It was like a rigidness I hadn't even known was there, just sort of slipped into the river and made way to a softer pink brightness. And from that day on, I've not once again judged a woman for pink nails or fake lashes, because I had found that aspect within myself and had brought her home. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm started to wear pink bodycon dresses and stilettos. It's really just about the inner experience to taste and reconcile with that part of us and to bring her home and heal her by no longer judging that. Loving every part of ourselves. Like, this is really what integration looks like. It's not always solemn and ceremonial. Sometimes it's just a red dress in a room full of dancing, laughing women. And that's the healing. That's the embodiment. So that brings me to the practice I want to offer you today, beloved, because this work is not just meant to stay in your head, it's meant to be embodied. So if you feel called to this, book in a weekend or an evening and invite your trusted girlfriends, 2, 3, 5 women, whoever, how many feel right, and just choose women that you trust, that you feel really comfortable with, women you know can hold space for you with love without judging you. And then start by sitting together and asking yourselves honestly and out loud, which flavors of the divine feminine am I still judging in myself or in others? It's basically the same thing. Which ones make me uncomfortable? And then just move through the spectrum slowly. Feel into those energies of the virgin, the mother, the bimbo, the sage, the healer, the queen, the wild woman, the priestess, the divine slut. Which one makes something tighten in you? Which one makes you judge? Which one feels like, so not me? Name her out loud to your sisters. And then see if someone in your group already embodies that flavor naturally. Someone who is comfortable in that energy. And ask that sister for her help. Maybe she can lend you something like a piece of clothing, or an insight, or a song. Let her teach you how to be comfortable in that energy through her being. And then you practice together. Put on a song that can feel like, that song is really describing that energy. Maybe it's Ariana Grande, or Ayla Nero, or perhaps our beloved bad girl Riri, Rihanna. And just dance and let her move through you. Don't think about it, feel it in your body. Let her speak, let her gesture, let her walk through the room. And in that, as she comes out, let the other women witness you. That is really the holy reclamation of being seen in that aspect. Let them encourage you. Let them adore you. Let them hold you in love as you do this tender or courageous thing of reclaiming your own exiled feminine parts. The feminine thrives on adoration. She opens fully when she is seen, when she feels safe, and when someone is looking at her with true love. So let your sisters see all of you, especially the parts you've been hiding or fearing, and let them remind you that you're beautiful, that you're welcome here, that she is welcome, and that every part of you belongs. And this is not about performance, this is the sacred medicine. Because bringing home an exiled flavor of the divine feminine is not just a gift to yourself or your beloved or the collective, it is also a gift to her, your divine mother. Every time one of her daughters stops casting out a part of herself, the ancient wound in the collective feminine narrows. Because the great she, the divine mother who holds us all, she wants you to be loved. So you're not just healing yourself by loving yourself, you're also healing something much older and much larger than yourself. So beloved, as we open this episode with the voice of the Divine Mother, with the wisdom of Sophia, I also want to close with her voice again, like sacred bookends. Because everything we talked about today, the ancient histories and the temple priestesses, the collective wound and the feminine exile, she knows all of it. She has always known, and she has always held it. And she has been singing this across millennia, waiting for us to be ready to hear her again. Now she says, "Do not be afraid of my power. Why do you despise my fear and curse my pride? I am she who exists in all fears and in trembling boldness. I am she who is timid, and I am safe in a comfortable place. I am witless, and I am wise. Why did you hate me with your schemes? I shall shut my mouth among those whose mouths are shut, and then I will show up and speak. She's not waiting for you to be perfect. She's not waiting for you to be pure. She's not waiting for you to have healed every exiled wound and integrate every shadow and loved your way back into wholeness. She's simply waiting for you to stop choosing between light and dark. She's waiting for you to stop deciding that some of her heart is sacred and some is shameful. Please, she whispers, stop standing in front of the mirror, offering her only the parts that you have approved. The Madonna is the holy whore. The virgin is the wild woman. The sage is the sacred slut. The holy is the human. All of it is her. All of it is you. And you were never asked to be less than all of it. Now come home to yourself, beloved, all the way. Now, if this episode stirred something in you and you feel the call to explore this homecoming, this holy reclamation more deeply in a safe and held space, I'm offering one-on-one sacred mentoring sessions. This is a personal container where we do exactly this kind of work together. Meeting these exiled parts, releasing the fears and judgments that have kept them locked away, and expanding into a larger, freer, more joyful version of yourself. A woman who takes up her full space in the world. If that speaks to you, I'll leave a link for you in the show notes so you can explore sacred mentoring more deeply. And if this episode moved you, please share it with a sister who needs to hear this. And if you feel called, leave a review and leave a comment. Like, these conversations need to spread, because the healing of the collective divine feminine happens one woman at a time, through truth-telling and remembering with love, in the company of other women who are doing the same. Until next time, I bless you, and so does she. So now, beloved, let these words seep like warm oil into the old wound that whispers too much or not enough. Remember, you are never alone. You are eternally held. And if this episode nourished you, please leave a review and subscribe. It helps this podcast grow and reach more hearts ready to remember love. If you wish to drink even deeper, join our community over on Substack for more intimate stories, love-drenched poetry, and sacred fire. You can find us at nadianeria.substack.com, and I'll also leave a link in the show notes for you. Until next time, may you remember your own sacredness. May you rest in the everlasting arms of love. And may you breathe as one beloved of God.